In just 36 seconds, one of Hollywood's biggest legends went from sitting calmly on a talk show couch to storming off set in absolute fury, leaving the host speechless and the entire studio in complete shock. What started as a simple conversation about his new movie turned into a volcanic explosion of accusations, interruptions, and disrespect that nobody saw coming. Before we dive into this absolute train wreck, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now. We bring you daily videos exposing Hollywood's darkest scandals, the confrontations they don't want you to see, and the moments that reveal who these celebrities really are behind the cameras. Last night's episode of Tamron Hall was supposed to be a celebration. Samuel L. Jackson, the man who has given us some of the most iconic performances in cinema history, was there to talk about his latest project. The audience was excited, the energy in the studio was high, and everything seemed perfectly normal. But what unfolded over the next several minutes would become one of the most uncomfortable and explosive moments in daytime television history. Samuel walked onto the stage with his usual cool confidence, wearing a sharp black suit and his signature style. The audience erupted in applause as he made his way to the chair across from Tamron. He smiled, waved to the crowd, and settled into his seat. Tamron greeted him with a big smile, thanking him for coming on the show. Samuel nodded, saying he was happy to be there. The first few minutes were friendly enough, with light conversation about how his day was going and some jokes about the weather. Then Tamron shifted gears. She leaned forward with that serious interviewer look and said she wanted to talk about something important. Samuel's expression changed slightly, becoming more focused. Tamron began asking him about a controversial statement he had made months ago regarding the film industry and representation. She brought up quotes that Samuel had said in another interview, reading them from her cards. Samuel listened, his jaw tightening just a bit. When she finished reading the quotes, Tamron asked him to clarify what he meant, but the way she asked it felt less like curiosity and more like a challenge. Samuel took a breath and started to explain his position. He was talking about how Hollywood has a long history of not giving black actors the opportunities they deserve, and how he has had to fight for every role, every bit of respect, and every dollar he has earned. His voice was steady, measured, speaking from decades of experience in an industry that has not always treated him fairly. But before he could finish his thought, Tamron interrupted him. She cut right into his sentence, bringing up a different point, asking him about a specific director he had worked with. Samuel stopped mid-sentence, looking at her with slight surprise. He started to answer her new question, but again she interrupted him, this time bringing up something completely different, asking about his opinion on younger actors and whether he thought they had it easier now. Samuel's face showed the first real sign of frustration. He held up his hand slightly and said, "Hold on, can I finish what I was saying?" His tone was still respectful, but there was an edge to it. Tamron smiled, but it was one of those TV smiles that did not quite reach her eyes. She said, "Of course, go ahead," but the damage was already done. The flow of conversation had been broken, and you could feel the tension starting to build in the room. Samuel went back to his original point, explaining how the industry has changed in some ways but remained the same in others. He was speaking passionately, using his hands to emphasize his points, drawing from his own experiences. He talked about auditioning for roles that were then given to white actors, about being told he was too intense or too much when he was just being himself, about having to be twice as good to get half the recognition. As he spoke, Tamron's expression changed. She was not nodding along anymore. She was not showing the usual signs of an engaged listener. Instead, she looked almost impatient, like she was waiting for him to stop talking so she could jump in. And jump in she did. The moment Samuel paused to take a breath, Tamron launched into a counter-argument. She started talking about all the progress that has been made, listing off recent movies with diverse casts, mentioning award shows and their nominees, suggesting that maybe Samuel was being a bit too negative about the current state of things. Samuel's eyes narrowed. He let her finish, but you could see his posture changing. He sat up straighter, his hands gripping the armrests of his chair. When Tamron finally stopped talking, Samuel spoke up, and his voice had definitely changed. It was lower, more serious, with that intensity he brings to his most powerful film roles. "With all due respect," Samuel said, "you're talking about surface-level changes. You're talking about what looks good in headlines. I'm talking about what actually happens behind closed doors, in casting offices, in negotiations, in the rooms where decisions get made. He was not yelling, but his voice carried weight, commanding the space. I have been in this industry for over 30 years. I have seen things you have not seen. I have experienced things that do not make it into your research notes. The audience was dead silent now. You could have heard a pin drop. Tamron shifted in her seat, and instead of acknowledging his points, she did something that made the situation so much worse. She smiled, that same TV smile, and said in a tone that sounded almost condescending, "Well, Samuel, I think we all know you have had a very successful career. You have made a lot of money. You have been in huge movies. So maybe your perspective is a little different from other actors who are still struggling." The air in that studio changed instantly. Samuel's face went from frustrated to genuinely angry. He stared at Tamron for a long moment, and you could see him processing what she just said. His head tilted slightly to the side, and he let out a short, bitter laugh. "Excuse me," he said. "Are you seriously trying to suggest that because I have been successful, I do not get to talk about racism in Hollywood? Are you actually saying that to me right now?" Tamron tried to backtrack, saying that was not what she meant, but Samuel was not having it. He leaned forward in his chair, his voice rising. No, that is exactly what you meant. You are trying to dismiss everything I just said, because I have money now, because I have made it. Like somehow success erases the decades of bullshit I went through, like it means I should just shut up and be grateful. Tamron's smile was completely gone now. She tried to regain control of the interview, saying they should move on to talk about his new movie, but Samuel was not moving on. "Nah, we are not moving on," he said firmly. "You brought this up. You asked me about it. And now that I am giving you a real answer, an honest answer, you want to shut it down because it is making you uncomfortable." The tension in the studio was unbearable. Crew members were glancing at each other nervously. The audience did not know whether to clap or stay silent. Tamron tried again to redirect, saying she wanted to have a productive conversation. But her tone was defensive now, not conciliatory. Samuel shook his head, a look of disappointment crossing his face. "Productive conversation?" he repeated. "You have interrupted me 4 times already. You have dismissed my experiences. You have tried to make it seem like I am being negative when I am just being honest. That is not a conversation, Tamron. That is you trying to control a narrative." Tamron's face flushed. She was clearly not used to being called out like this on her own show. She fired back, saying that she has had many difficult conversations on her show, that she knows how to handle sensitive topics, and that maybe Samuel was being overly defensive. The moment those words left her mouth, you could see she regretted them, but it was too late. Samuel stood up, not quickly, not in a rushed panic, but slowly, deliberately. He unbuttoned his suit jacket, his eyes never leaving Tamron's face. "Overly defensive," he said, his voice deadly calm now, which was somehow more intimidating than when he was raising his voice. "I am overly defensive for not wanting to be talked over and dismissed on national television. That is rich." Tamron stood up too, trying to de-escalate, saying they should just take a breath and reset. But Samuel was already removing his microphone, unclipping it from his lapel. "There is no reset here," he said. "You invited me on this show. You asked me about serious issues, and when I gave you serious answers, you tried to make me look like the problem. That is some manipulative shit, and I am not doing it." The cursing made several audience members gasp quietly. Tamron looked flustered, completely thrown off her game. She tried to appeal to him, saying they still had more interview to do, that the audience wanted to hear about his new film. Samuel shook his head, dropping the microphone onto his chair. "The audience deserves a host who actually listens to her guests instead of trying to score points," he said. "You know what your problem is, Tamron? You think because you have a platform, you have the right to tell people what their experiences should mean. You don't get to do that with me." Tamron's voice went up an octave as she tried to defend herself, saying she was just trying to provide different perspectives, that it is her job to challenge her guests. Samuel let out another one of those bitter laughs. "Challenge?" he said. "You think that is what you were doing? You were not challenging me. You were dismissing me. There is a big difference, and if you cannot see that, that is on you." The situation escalated even further when Tamron, clearly rattled and defensive, made what would become the biggest mistake of the interview. She said, "Maybe you're just not used to being questioned by a black woman." The studio went completely silent. It was like everyone collectively held their breath. Samuel's face went through about 5 different emotions in 2 seconds, landing on utter disbelief. "Wow," he said, drawing the word out. "Wow. So now you are pulling that card. Now you are trying to make this about gender. Trying to flip the script like I am the bad guy for calling out your disrespect." He shook his head slowly, looking genuinely hurt now behind the anger. "That is low, Tamron. That is really low. You know damn well this has nothing to do with you being a black woman. My wife is a black woman. My daughter is a black woman. I have worked with countless black women in this industry and respected every single one of them. This is about you being a bad interviewer who cannot handle being challenged right back." Tamron tried to speak, but Samuel was not done. "You invited me here. You asked me provocative questions. And when you got provocative answers, you tried to shut me down, dismiss my experiences, and now you are trying to hide behind your identity to avoid accountability. That is not journalism. That is cowardice." The words hit like bombs. Tamron looked stunned, her mouth opening and closing as she tried to formulate a response. Her producers were probably screaming in her earpiece, but she seemed frozen. Samuel started walking toward the exit of the stage. Tamron found her voice finally, calling after him, saying they were not done, that he could not just leave. Samuel stopped and turned around one last time. "Watch me," he said simply. "I have walked off bigger stages than this, and I will do it again every time someone disrespects me and then tries to gaslight me about it. You want to have real conversations about real issues? Then learn how to actually listen to people. Until then, you are just another talk show host more interested in sound bites than truth." Tamron's face was red now. Whether from embarrassment or anger, it was hard to tell. She made one last attempt to salvage the situation, her voice taking on a sharp edge. "This is my show, Samuel. You do not get to come on here and tell me how to do my job." That was the final straw. Samuel turned back around and walked right up to the edge of the stage where it met the audience area. He looked at Tamron one more time, and when he spoke, his voice was clear and firm, making sure everyone in that studio heard him. "Your show?" he said. "This whole thing just proved everything I was saying about the industry. People with platforms think they are untouchable, think they can treat others however they want because they have the power in that moment. But respect is not about who has the microphone, Tamron. It is about how you treat people regardless of your position, and you failed that test spectacularly today." He then did something unexpected. He turned to the audience and addressed them directly. "I apologize that you all came here expecting to hear about a movie and instead got to witness this mess. But I will not apologize for standing up for myself. I will not apologize for walking away from disrespect, no matter where it comes from." Some audience members actually started clapping. Not everyone, but enough that it was noticeable. That seemed to make Tamron even more upset. "Security," she said, her voice shaky but trying to sound authoritative. "Please escort Mr. Jackson out of the building." That was when things got truly surreal. Samuel laughed, an actual genuine laugh of disbelief. "You are calling security on me? For what? For defending myself? For calling out your behavior?" He shook his head, still laughing in that way you do when something is so absurd you cannot even be angry anymore. "This is wild. This is absolutely wild." 2 security guards appeared, looking extremely uncomfortable with the situation. They clearly did not want to be involved in this. Samuel held up his hands in a placating gesture toward them. "It is cool, fellas. I am leaving. Do not worry." He looked at Tamron one final time. "You know what the saddest part about this whole thing is? I actually used to respect you. I thought you were one of the good ones. Someone who used their platform to elevate important voices and have meaningful conversations. But today showed me that you are just like the rest of them, more concerned with your ego than with actually doing good work." Tamron's eyes were shiny now, like she might cry, but her jaw was set in a hard line. "Get out," she said, her voice barely above a whisper but filled with venom. "Get out of my studio right now." Samuel gave a mock salute that trademarked Samuel L. Jackson intensity radiating from him. "Gladly," he said. I have been in better studios with better hosts who actually know how to have a conversation without making it about themselves. Good luck with your show, Tamron. Something tells me you are going to need it after this. He started walking again. And this time, he did not stop. The audience was completely divided now. Some people clapping for him. Others sitting in shocked silence. A few actually booing, though it was hard to tell if they were booing him or the situation in general. Tamron stood there, her arms crossed, watching him go. You could see her trying to maintain her composure, trying to look like she was in control, but her hands were shaking slightly. As Samuel reached the exit at the side of the stage, he paused one more time, not turning around, just stopping. By the way, he called back, this is exactly why actors do not trust talk shows anymore. Because you all act like you want honest conversations. But what you really want is for us to perform for you, to fit into whatever narrative you have already decided on. Well, I am done performing off-screen. And with that, he was gone. He walked through the exit door, and it closed behind him with a heavy thud that echoed through the silent studio. For several long seconds, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Tamron just stood there, staring at the door he had walked through. Her chest was rising and falling rapidly, her breath coming fast. You could see her struggling to figure out what to do next, how to recover from what had just happened. Finally, she turned back to the audience, that fake smile trying desperately to return to her face. Well, she said, her voice not quite steady, that was certainly unexpected. Some nervous laughter rippled through the crowd, but it died quickly. The energy in the room was wrong, heavy, uncomfortable. Tamron tried to continue. We are going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we will, but she could not even finish the sentence. Her voice cracked, and she looked away from the cameras. One of her producers rushed onto the stage, whispering urgently in her ear. Tamron nodded stiffly, her professionalism barely holding together by a thread. She looked back at the audience, and for just a moment, you could see the real emotion breaking through. Anger, embarrassment, hurt, defensiveness, all mixed together. I want to be clear, she said, her voice stronger now, but with an edge of desperation. I was simply trying to have a balanced conversation about a complex topic. Mr. Jackson chose to make this personal, chose to attack me instead of engaging respectfully. But even as she said it, you could see some audience members shaking their heads. They had witnessed the whole thing. They had seen how she interrupted him, how she dismissed his experiences, how she tried to use her identity as a shield when he called her out. The murmuring in the audience grew louder, people whispering to each other, pulling out their phones, probably already tweeting about what they had just seen. Tamron seemed to realize she was losing the room. Her shoulders sagged slightly, and she looked toward her producers again, this time with an almost pleading expression. They were making cutting motions with their hands, telling her to wrap it up, to go to commercial, to end this disaster. Tamron took a deep breath, straightened her jacket, and looked at the main camera. We will be right back, she said. But her eyes told a different story. They said she knew this was bad. They said she knew this was going to follow her. The cameras cut, and the red lights went off. But people in the audience later reported that Tamron immediately broke down the moment she thought she was off air. She apparently put her face in her hands and just stood there, while her producers and assistants rushed around her, trying to figure out how to salvage the rest of the show, trying to do damage control on a situation that was already spiraling out of their control. Meanwhile, Samuel L. Jackson walked out of that studio building with his head held high, his expression neutral but his eyes still burning with righteous anger. He did not speak to anyone as he left. He did not stop for the shocked crew members who watched him pass. He just walked straight to his car, got in, and drove away, leaving behind him one of the most explosive talk show confrontations in recent memory, a moment that would be replayed and analyzed and debated for days to come. What people would remember about this confrontation was not just the blow-up itself, but what it represented. It was a masterclass in what happens when a host forgets that their job is to facilitate conversation, not dominate it. It was a reminder that respect is earned, not owed, regardless of who has the platform. It was a demonstration that even the most successful, most famous actors will only tolerate so much disrespect before they stand up for themselves. And most importantly, it was a stark illustration of how quickly things can fall apart when ego gets in the way of genuine dialogue. Samuel L. Jackson had walked into that studio as a guest ready to share his experiences and promote his work. He walked out as someone who had been pushed too far by a host who could not handle the heat she herself had turned up. Tamron Hall had started the interview as a respected talk show host, known for tackling difficult subjects. She ended it as someone who had let her own defensiveness and need for control destroy what could have been a meaningful conversation about important issues in Hollywood. The confrontation lasted less than an hour from start to finish, but its impact would last much longer. The way Samuel handled himself, calling out the disrespect while maintaining his dignity, refusing to back down even when Tamron tried to flip the narrative, standing firm in his truth despite the pressure to just go along to get along. That was what made this moment so powerful. He showed that sometimes the most professional thing you can do is walk away from a situation where you are not being treated with basic respect. He demonstrated that having difficult conversations about race and representation in Hollywood requires actual listening, not performative questioning, followed by dismissal. And he proved that no amount of fame or success should require you to accept being talked down to or having your lived experiences invalidated. For Tamron, the aftermath of this confrontation would be complicated. She had let her ego and her need to control the narrative get in the way of doing her job well. She had interrupted a guest repeatedly, dismissed his decades of experience, tried to use surface-level examples to counter his deep personal knowledge, and then, when called out, had tried to hide behind identity politics instead of acknowledging her mistakes. These were all choices she made, and they were all captured on camera for everyone to see and judge. The security call at the end, trying to have Samuel removed after she had created the hostile situation in the first place, that was just the final cherry on top of a disastrous Sunday of bad interviewing decisions. The audience members who were there that night would tell their friends and family about what they witnessed. They would talk about how uncomfortable it was, how you could feel the tension building, how some of them wanted to speak up themselves but did not know if they should. They would mention how divided the room became, some people clearly on Samuel's side, others uncomfortable with how confrontational things got, and a few who seemed to think Tamron had been unfairly attacked. But most would agree on one thing. It was one of the most intense, unscripted, genuine moments they had ever seen on a talk show. As Samuel's car pulled away from the studio, somewhere inside Tamron was probably already meeting with her team, trying to figure out how to spin this, how to control the narrative that was even now spreading across social media like wildfire. But spin can only do so much when everyone saw what really happened. The cameras captured it all. Every interruption, every dismissal, every defensive reaction, every attempt to deflect instead of reflect. The truth was out there, and no amount of PR could put that genie back in the bottle. Samuel L. Jackson had walked off that stage, and in doing so, he had made a statement that would echo far beyond that one uncomfortable afternoon in a television studio.